Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video in this series. So in today's video we are going to be taking a look at this slot node that you see here. So this is going to be a relatively short video because it's going to be a very simple breakdown on what this node is, what it does, what it helps with, and actually gives us some answers as to, the slot node that we have set up within our translation mode, our rotation mode, and half-life, where we ended up doing the is slot active and we would call default slot. Well, that's this guy right here, and I didn't realize it was this node all along until I was like, and then when I did my research on it, well, it was this node that was the reason for that. So I feel dumb, and I hope y'all are better at me than like finding the clues are necessary or knew what this node was prior to that, because I had no idea it was this. So I just found it funny. But basically in this video, it's going to be short, it's going to be brief, and we're going to go over this node and then do discussions for the future stuff that we will be looking at in the next video. So basically going over this node, as you can see when we hover over it, that it gives us a basic synopsis saying that it plays animation from code using animontage. So this thing right here already, using the term animontage, basically means that any animation montages that we have set up within our character blueprint, or even potentially the animation blueprint, but most of the time, like from my experience, I've seen montages be put in the character blueprint, just because when you are initiating like an action and whatnot, then you are playing just a very basic animation or whatever within your blueprint. So like as we saw in GASP, where when they went through the whole, line tracing or the tri-traversal action at the end, it has a function to play an animation montage, which then links to the animation montages, which plays those from the traversal folder within GASP. So to give a brief look at what this node does, or let's go over, its general functionality, right? So this node right here basically serves as a placeholder within Unreal Engine 5, or is the location where animations can be dynamically injected and blended. So in this context, it's commonly used to handle animation montages, like I said. So what does it do exactly? So we have a couple two key important notes for this. One would be slot node functionality. So this node allows you to inject animations from an animation montage into the animation graph when you play an animation, such as for traversal or attacks or any other specific actions. This node acts as a channel to blend the animation from that montage onto the current pose of your character. So basically, as far as this goes, this is, allows us to have the fluid animations and stuff like that when we enter like a traversal, but then also it blends us nicely back into our character's, normal pose, whether we're continuing to run forward or we're going into an idle position. Basically, that's kind of like how it does. That's why we also have the interpolate, the accumulate, hold, and release within these different modes, because kind of when we went over the offset root bone video, shows what everything is doing, right? So when we go into these functions that we called the is slot active for it, basically when a montage is playing, we are holding or accumulating or interpolating, mostly accumulating our animation data and putting it on hold until we are done using the animation that becomes slotted within this node, and then we'll release and give us back our animations, or our idle, our run, walk, whatever, once that animation's finished. So that's what this does, is just it allows us to blend or actually capture those montages and then blend us into that montage and blend us out of it. So that leads me to the next point, which is blending. So the slot takes the montage's animation data and blends it with the existing animation pipeline, meaning this whole white pulsating thing would be your pipeline. So for example, you can have a base idle animation playing, and this node will smoothly blend in a traversal animation like climbing or sliding when triggered by the animation montage. So basically what we had just discussed when I went over the first key point about it. So that's what this node does. So it's actually very important to have this node, set within your animation blueprint in order for it to capture the animation data and blend us in and out smoothly, and then, pass on the data within our pipeline to the rest of the graph. So to briefly go over the settings here, so you'll notice how we have a slot name, which is the default group.defaultSlot, and then we have always update source pose. So as you can see, the slot name is the name of this slot exposed to gameplay code, etc. And why we have it as default slot, so this refers to the specific group and slot in which the montage is injected. Slots allow you to specify where in the animation graph the montage will blend in. The default setup in our case, or your case, whatever, or at least for our case at the moment, is that we have the default group with the default slot within this group. You can create other groups or slots if you need to blend different points, for different types of animations. However, I'm not sure where to actually make new groupings. All I'm familiar with is that we have this, as well as, the rest of these groups. Like we have an additive group, we have the default group, but then we have different stuff within the default group. But then within our additive group, you'll see an additive hit react. So before we go into all those, let's go over the always update source pose. So this is whether we should continue the update the source pose regardless of whether it should be used. And so in GASP they have this set to false. So what this does is, when set to false, the slot node will stop evaluating the source pose while the montage is playing, meaning it solely focuses on the montage's animation. So we're not, taking updates within our normal played animations, like your run, walk, sprint, idle, whatever. With it being false, we solely focus on the montage at hand, whether again we're climbing, sliding, whatever. So if set to true, then the node continues to evaluate both the base animation pose, which would be our source, and the montage. But this could be useful if you need to keep your base pose updated alongside the montage. However, it can eat up your resources, if you try to do it that way. So that way you can, instead of having it set kind of in this where we can just release, our position or our animation to go back and, blend out of an animation, so to speak. So basically, the summary of this would be that it is primarily used for injecting traversal animations from montages into the character's animation graph at runtime. The blend behavior and which specific slot is used can be customized, making it a flexible tool for adding dynamic animations in Unreal Engine. So that is pretty much the synopsis of this default node. So it's actually very handy, very useful. So I definitely would be keeping this in, my animations going forward, because I did not realize how important this actually was. So now to briefly go over some of these to just try to get like a baseline of what's going on here, right? So, for example, you'll see this full body one. So with the full body, that means the animation montage will affect the entire body of the character. This setting is typically used when you want to override or blend in animations that control the whole character. So for example, like a full body traversal animation like jumping or swimming. The blending will replace or mix the full body animation montage depending on your setup. So then we have, stuff like the upper body additive, right? So the upper body additive, is used to blend the animation montage onto just the upper body of the character. And the additive part means the animation will layer on top of the existing base pose. This is useful for actions like aiming, reloading, or waving, where the lower body should still follow the base animation like walking or running, while only the upper body follows the animation montage. So this is useful for, blending where you're trying to do you want to keep your foot animations or your lower body animations going, or just in a base idle pose maybe, but then you want to do a reload, right, of your gun. Then the upper body additive, you can utilize that in a way to where you can blend the reload animation of just the upper body with like the idleness of, you know, your lower legs, or your lower body, or maybe you're walking and you want to blend it with the upper body reload, you know, stuff like that. So, you know, additive animations blend more softly with the base pose by adjusting the upper body without fully overriding the underlying animation. So, you know, with the other parts of this, because you also have, or I thought there was lower body when I looked at it earlier, but yeah, you have a lot of, you know, upper body stuff like the additive, full body additive. Then you got like the aim offset and the additive hit react, which, you know, would be your hit reactions, you know, how you can, you know, you can blend your poses where it's like, hey, I'm idle, but I need my upper body to move as it's being like hit react, right? You know, so stuff like that. And then you got your pre-aim where your character can do like different like pre-aim setups with the full body, you know, with how it blends with those kind of animations, like I said, with like swimming or flying, whatever, when doing like pre-aiming. So, you know, stuff like that, where you got the dynamic additives, where that's a whole thing of itself. I didn't get enough of a chance to actually look over the dynamic additives, but as far as the other ones, I pretty much kind of like looked over and understand. So like I said, this was a pretty basic video. So this is where basically the anim montages come into play. So anytime you do put, you know, animation montages within your character to play out, like said traversal, or maybe throwing punches, like you're doing punch combo montages, stuff like that, you want to have this within your character's animation blueprint, just so that way it can blend your body nicely, like in and out of, you know, the animations. So, you know, for example, if we look at, let's say the game animation sample project, right? So you can see how we're doing it, where we have our motion matching database that's being called, updating with steerings and stuff like that, and it's passing on this data to an apply mesh space additive, where it's getting our leans when we're running, and then here where it's getting our aim offsets and blending them here, and then it's passing them into here, so that way we're basically doing a bunch of like upper body movements, and then, you know, so it will blend into like whatever animation we're doing. So because we have it set to default slot, it is basically going to blend into our traversal animations, and then just kind of like pass through this information down the pipeline after it blends out that animation, to then, you know, pass it through the offset root bone, and then like our foot placement. Like, okay, if you saw my previous video, you'll know where I got the foot placement, but, you know, and then we finally go into the pose history and then our output pose. So that is essentially the brief rundown of a default slot. So, you know, as it says here, the slot is where the traversal animation montages are injected into the graph. So just like we discussed, anytime you're playing animation montages, this is actually very important, and you could just pretty much kind of keep it on the default slot as far as that goes, unless you create your own slots. So let me go ahead then, because we have finally went over that basic node, I'm going to move these over briefly, and then I'm going to copy, didn't mean to bring up a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to copy and paste the comment bubble for this, and we are then basically done with this video. So like I said earlier, we're going to go over a couple things just because I want y'all to, you know, look out for the future of what I will be discussing. I've just been pretty busy this week, so it's taken me a while to get these videos out, because I'm trying to participate in game jams and whatnot to try to further enhance my skill set and whatnot. But basically, so if we go back into the game animation sample project, the next one we'll be looking at would be the aim offsets and the leans. However, what I'm debating on whether or not to do, because it's easy to go over the functions and stuff that are set up in here and what each node is doing. It's just that if I want to do the setups of like the actual blend space 1D that you see here for our additive lean, because when you actually double click on it, it is a 1D blend space, and you can see how it actually does a lean, and that's because it actually has its blend samples over here to be able to do its lean. And then let me close that out and go back in here. Oop, I don't know what happened there. But then, you know, when we go into here and we go into our blend space, aim offset, how you have your, you know, different look arounds for your aim offset when you're looking around with your character, and how it's the blend samples are all right here. So that's pretty much what's going on there. So I'm debating on whether or not to kind of migrate those animations over to the GASP from scratch. I more or less want to just go over and cover the functionalities of this, but I'll probably end up doing it anyway, because then after this, you know, once we get through this stuff, then we'll be ready to go into the motion matching. I wanted to do a video on the pose history just because this is, you know, a very simple setup, but the problem is you know, this is the node, and this node is the second motion matching related anim graph node that is crucial for motion matching to function. So it's pointless if we put it in there without the actual motion matching node. So that's why I'm gonna do, you know, my I guess finale video of actually doing the motion matching node. So I probably will break these up into their own separate videos. So if I end up doing that, then pretty much it's going to be 2 videos of just this, and then I'll do my finale video of going over the motion matching, and then that'll pretty much cover the game animation sample project from scratch. So other than that, guys, there's a lot of cool stuff that I've also been figuring out that I want to show y'all in future videos. But, you know, after this series, I'm going to be doing your first 60 minutes in motion matching by the UE dev community. So be on the lookout for that. But other than that, y'all have been great. I hope this was educational as far as what the default slot node is for. So if you did enjoy that, please check out my other videos and my future videos to come. But other than that, y'all have a great rest of your day, and y'all take care.